Hi, and welcome back to Brandsplaining. I'm Lindsay Roche.
And I'm Allie Lefevre.
And this week, we got to talk to our dear friend, and I'm going to call her a pop culture icon, or maybe a pop culture expert.
Would love
Icon
that.
feels strong, but I think she's just basically like, she's the word razzle dazzle in human form. And her name is Kate Kennedy, and she is from the Brandon podcast, Be There in 5.
Yes. We love her.
We do.
And just to give you a little background on Kate, so she is a former market research professional, and she authored an amazing book called Twinkle Twinkle Social Media Star. It's a #1 new release, and it's actually the reason Lindsay and I know her. We met her when she was hawking her book at an event.
And I saw her book online because she had made her own press kits. Remember? And they were hilarious. And I saw an influencer had posted it. And I remember thinking, that book seems hilarious because that feels like such a unique and funny way to have press for your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kate is probably most notably a pop culture commentator, but she's very much a seasoned entrepreneur. The Be There in 5 brand took off with these things that she created called Remind doormats, and they went viral. And she hand painted doormats in order to remind herself to do things like turn off her straightener or turn off her curling iron. And that just spiraled into an incredible business that ended up being sold in Nordstrom and featured in Teen Vogue and Glamour and BuzzFeed, and really grew her business in a myriad of other categories over the last several years.
Right. But what she sort of focuses on now is the Be There in 5 podcast. I'd say that's her like main
squeeze.
her first child, main baby. And it is a long form show that explores all the facets of pop culture in a comedic and analytic format. And that last part is, I think, what really sets her apart, because how many people are combining those two? She is such a deep thinker. She will dive really deep. And the podcast regularly charts in the category top 200 on iTunes, which we just think is amazing. We were actually guests last year.
I think we put her podcast on the map.
I think that that's true.
I like to give us all credit for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and, her brand really took off when these two sort of, unknowns, Allie and Lindsay, came on our podcast, blew the roof off that place. But, yeah, I'd say we just have always admired her as a businesswoman, an entrepreneur, and a friend for her commitment to her creative direction. No matter what she's doing, we feel like her brand personality has stayed rooted in humor and thoughtfulness. And one of our favorite topics, the 90s and early 2000s zeitgeist.
Ooh, our sweet spot. And and this episode, like the title states, Get Niche or Die Trying, it really centers in this idea of being a niche brand. And she had a ton of insight to share on building a successful brand from scratch. And we talked about developing and cultivating and really sticking with your niche, and how to stay in your lane, and how to pulse check what projects and opportunities are right for you. I think she has such a strong sense of integrity and is really, really good at saying yes to the things that are right for her brand and no to the shiny deals and opportunities that aren't. And I think that that's a lesson we could all learn.
Yeah.
We also got into her bout of teen poetry,
Yeah.
and that was a real treat.
That's a branding lesson in itself. I just really liked when she talked about how to leverage criticism that you're getting, and like what to take and what not to take, how to make jokes out of that, how to continue to find your people through like what you're sticking to. A lot of people want her to find a host or want her to shorten her podcast, and she is really just committed to her brand. And then she has found very, very devoted listeners and fans because of that. So yeah, I think overall the big takeaway that Kate will teach you guys is how to be proud to be an outlier industry, how to leverage that to your advantage, and how to resist trying to be like your competitors and be like everybody else.
Yeah. And like we said early on, Kate is our buddy. So we wanted to record this in person. We thought it was such a fun opportunity for us to hang. She is in our bubble right now, so it was COVID approved. But you'll notice the audio quality is a little bit different than other interviews because we are in person and my home is just not set up for studio quality.
It's just rude that you wouldn't have put mattresses all up on all of your walls for this.
The intended plan.
Talk about commitment.
I know, right? But regardless, we think you're going to really love this episode. And if you want to hear more from Kate, you can find her on Instagram at Be There in 5 or on her website, BeThereIn5.com. And enjoy.
And now, for all the women in the business of being women in business, For girl bossy bosses and boss girly girls. For CEOs, mogals, and branding babes ready to make herstory. Please put your lady hands together and welcome to the stage, Brandsplaining.
Hey, Kate. Welcome to Brandsplaining.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so great to have you. It's we've missed you. It's been 48 hours since we've seen you, so
I know. I feel like I live here now, and I love it.
I know. Well, you're now in the friend group who just walks in the house without needing to knock. So I feel like that's a
gotta
strong
say,
start.
I have never been that person. It takes me a lot to be comfortable enough to walk in a house.
Yeah.
I don't walk on people's lawns.
Oh yeah, I don't either.
You know. But today I just barged right on in and saw Matt. I was like, "Hello, I'm sorry, I should have not."
Heading upstairs. See you later.
Now.
No, I love that. So yeah, we're obviously recording at my house right now because we don't have access to our podcast studio at the moment.
And we all have the same podcast studio.
Yeah.
At Cards Against Humanity, but we can't do that. Do you think we'll ever be able to do it again?
Oh, I hope so.
I know. We were even talking about like, if that building ever goes up for sale, let's just all go in on it.
Oh, yeah.
Have like a women's podcast
Truly.
conglomerate.
The studio and the stage.
Oh, it would be ideal. Matt has a notification on his phone because he has like a commercial real estate tracker that notifies
good.
if that ever goes
Oh,
on the
good.
market. So
Nice.
let you guys know.
It is different. You feel so professional in like a studio.
You do.
But I actually podcast from home even when the studio is open. I only go there for guests. So I'm used to this
good point.
vibe.
Yeah. And I feel like we're lucky because we're in like a quarantine bubble with one another that we can do this in person. Because I think for the foreseeable future, most of our interviews will be virtual.
Yeah, they'll have to be. All right, well, let's kick this bad boy off. So, Kate, important question. What are you drinking?
Oh, at this exact moment, having some water and Diet Dr. Pepper.
Wow, Diet Dr. Pepper.
Yes.
Is that a standard drink, like in rotation for you?
Yeah, are you soda? I did see that you're a cream soda
I love
gal.
cream soda.
Cream
So
soda.
I don't even know
like-
how to like categorize someone who drinks. I don't know cream soda people really.
What's a
like,
cream? Like what falls into the category of cream soda? Like root beer?
No,
Yeah.
cream soda is cream soda.
Maybe I've never had it.
A&W manufactures both. I'd say it's the unsung hero of A&W. It's a vanilla root beer, essentially. It's like similar, but not the same. It's a drink I have maybe twice a year that I think partially the scarcity is why I favorite.
Oh,
And
okay.
I wasn't allowed to have soda on weekdays as a kid. And a lot of my adult behaviors are in direct contrast to the things I was not allowed to do as a kid. So yes, I'm a big soda drinker, and I got that Instacarted to me this morning.
Wow. Instacart
Yeah,
too.
really exciting.
I do think that is true of people who grew up with strict parents or like strict rules, is that in adulthood you find yourself doing things that you couldn't do just because you. That's like I think why I like when I'm by myself and I think I can do whatever I want. Like to be in my 30s and still think I can do whatever I want. Like you've been able to do whatever you want for a long time.
We've all talked about the nighttime high of when our significant others go to bed and we're all alone in the house. Like I get a wave of energy and excitement that's I liken to being a kid staying up on a Thursday.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, the whole house to myself now.
Oh yeah, it's thrilling. And like I even think watching TV in bed, I'm always like I feel wild.
Because we weren't
I wasn't
like
allowed.
Feral. She's like a feral animal.
TV in bedroom kids or a family. Like I had never. So now that we have laptops and can watch it, like I'm still not a TV in the bedroom person. So when I do that, I'm always like, let's be bad.
Oh yeah. Did you
Let's
guys
take
have
this
a
show to the
second,
bedroom.
line just for you. You know how like some people had second lines in their bedrooms?
own private line.
No, I never had
Yeah.
that. I'm jealous though.
Insanity. I used to love my rich friends who had like intercom, second lines,
yeah.
trampolines, the whole song and
I had
dance.
their own like voicemail.
Oh yeah.
And it was customized and really cool. I had my own phone in my bedroom, which I thought was like
Dang,
incredible. And a
cordless?
caller ID. And caller ID.
Wow.
I can remember my high school boyfriend called and I'd be like, oh, Eric's calling on the caller ID. Mom, I got this one.
Boys weren't allowed to call, or we weren't even allowed to get phone calls after 9 p.m., I think, on a school night.
Oh, wow.
And so if we were going to do it, we would call time and temp so that them calling wouldn't ring in the house. It would ring in call waiting. So we would pick up if we knew,
so
we'd tell
smart.
them, if you're going to call at 9, whatever, I'll have just called time and temp or movie phone or something. So you're like, and then you'd hear the beep. And so it wouldn't ring in the house. It would just beep.
That is so smart.
That's a really smart workaround.
And now we don't have to tell anyone how old we are because we can tell how we
Very
grew
much
up.
dated the guests of this podcast.
Kate, I saw that you got asked this on your Q&A last night, but it's one of our favorite questions, and that's what's something you love that most everybody else hates?
Oh, what did I say on my thing last night?
I think you said waking up to rain.
Yeah. That's one thing I find that people really don't. I feel like my unpopular opinion, would be that unpopular opinions are usually popular opinions that pander to the not like other girls trope that people really want to do.
Yeah.
And typically people will say something that I'm like, actually, I think a lot of people, like, I love to stay in. You know what I mean?
Crazy thing about me.
Yeah. But I will say, since I was a kid, like my parents used to find me sitting on the deck in the rain. Like I love rain. I love inclement weather. I like being cold to hot. I think I'm just moody like that. Like I
hear you.
I feel more comfortable if my surroundings are a little bit moodier, grayer. It's why I like nighttime. Like I feel the most creative in that context, and I'm not totally sure why, but it's very much like ingrained in me as a person.
It does feel like a very private, secretive, special time and environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rain or nighttime or both?
Kind of both a little bit. I don't know. There's like a coziness to it.
When I was in college, I wrote a poem called Barometric Pressures about...
God, I wish you would have told us this in advance. Maybe we can splice this in the editing process.
I could find it. It was basically this like poem talking bad about my friends who kept waking me up and asking me to do things like play Frisbee that I would never do. Because they were like, when people say it's a beautiful day, I'm like, I just want to crawl back in my shell because it reminds me of my parents wanting me to like do yard work.
Yeah.
Or go to a park when I didn't want to.
Yeah.
It's like people use "It's a Beautiful Day" to make you be really active. And I think I'm a person that's a little happier in like a more relaxed setting.
Yeah. I hear that.
Barometric Pressures is a play on word about the pressure to get things done and the pressure people would make me feel like by waking me up in the morning. And reading it back, I'm like, oh, this is clinical depression. I didn't know that at the time.
Wait, how old were you?
Barometric depression.
Depressures.
I was, 19, 20.
I
wasn't my best self in college.
I thought you said you were in elementary school when you wrote that, and I was in awe that you made that word play that young.
Oh, no, I wish.
I feel like I also like rain because it feels like you're not going to have to do something social if you don't want to. So mine's even sadder. It's not like you're not going to have to do yard work. I was like, no one's going to pressure me. I think it was when I was learning that maybe I was an introvert, not an extrovert.
Exactly.
And I would wake up on like a Saturday when it was rainy in the summer or something. You're like, okay, people aren't going to be like, we're getting the gang and we're going to play beach volleyball and we're going to do this, this, and this. And I like really wanted to just like read or do something else.
Exactly. In Barometric Pressures, I call it an omnipotent excuse from the skies. Canceling that's oversees my tyrannical planner. I mean, it's ridiculous. But yeah, that's exactly the thing. That's the mood. That's the vibe.
I ask that you submit that to us because we have to post that.
Oh, yeah.
Either
At least an excerpt.
Or we have to, maybe we'll do like a dramatic reading of it that we can add it in to the podcast somewhere. Maybe that's at the tail end of the podcast. People, stay tuned.
You're right. Yeah. I'm sure this is really going to hook people till the end.
Yeah, this is how we get them to stay.
Major bummer.
All right. So we always do a few like warm-up questions just to get you to spill your guts a little bit.
Totally.
Even though we do know you, so we may know the answer to some of these, but for our listeners, what are you listening to or reading or watching that has you super excited right now?
You know, I wish I had a more intellectual answer, but currently I am listening to the audiobook Finding Freedom about Meghan and Harry's exit from the royal family.
How is that?
And it's actually very good. I thought it was going to be dishy, like mean, gossipy. I thought it was more like Samantha Markle, her like problematic sister writing it. Yeah. But it's actually a guy that was in the press circle that traveled with them all these places and knows them personally. And it just gives, and my suspicion the entire time is, people were so mad at Meghan Markle. But I'm like, why are they calling it Megxit? It should be Sus-exit. It's both of them.
Right.
But again, people always want to peg the woman as this like controlling person. And I think that her edit is like, she came, like swooped in, told Harry they have to leave, wants to go back to California to like live her celebrity life. But it's just not the case. And I think there's a lot of institutional problems that they actually are standing up against that deserve a lot more credit than they're getting. And anyways, I really like the book and I'm listening to it to podcast about it. But when I say I read, I listen. I'm not a big reader, but I am an audiobook listener.
Great.
Yeah.
When's the last time you laughed really, really, really hard? That's 3 reallys.
Yeah, so don't give us a
It's
two really
It's
answer.
a hard question.
When I found my mom's Twitter feed.
She has a Twitter feed?
Yeah, but there's only 3 tweets in it from like 2015.
No.
I don't think she really understood what you're supposed to do with it. So, like the first tweet I believe was hats off to Mother Nature.
Oh, that's so
She's tweeting at Mother Nature. I mean, like she just was saying like things she thought.
Just expressing herself?
Yeah. And then one was.
That's how I use Twitter. It really is.
Right. You know, and it wasn't wrong, but it was just like it's like she's not like super into social media. So I think all of us, like we were just, I think we found it at Christmas and we were just like, what? This is so
Did
exciting.
she tell you that she had one at one point?
No, she didn't. But when we found it, it was hats off to Mother Nature. And then they live in a very rural, small town. And she talked about the traffic on the bridge. It was very informative, local, hard-hitting news. And it's just one of those things that was cracking us up. But I actually keep an iPhone note I call Belly Laugh for when that happens, because I think it's easy to forget those moments.
Yeah.
And then they're important to revisit.
That's
Great.
great.
I have so many questions. I could spend the whole podcast talking about this. Does she have any followers before you guys?
God, no.
So who did she
That's why
think?
it's funny.
Who did she think she was tweeting to?
I'm not totally
She
sure.
probably didn't even know how it worked. She probably thought the whole world saw it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that she just thought, like, to be fair, like micro-blogging is what they called it at first. Like, it's just a place to put your thoughts. And I think she's like,
Yeah, what a
who
delight.
do I want to send my regards to today? Mother Nature. And it's like, yeah, like you
Yeah,
can't
why
tag
not?
her, but it doesn't mean she doesn't hear it. Doesn't mean it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
she feels it. She feels it.
I remember this. I think it had to have been made up now, but like a guy said he convinced his dad that Twitter was Google. And so it was just these guys, all the things his dad was Googling. But I feel like it couldn't have been true because his dad would have been like, Google doesn't work.
Google sucks.
Because it was just things he was asking.
That's brilliant.
So that's very funny, but I feel like I'd have to Snopes it.
People do that on Facebook a lot because the search bar is right above the status update bar. And I live to see like, Jeremy Smith is Caitlin Moore. And it's like, oh, you were just looking up Caitlin, what she's up to.
So mean.
Wild.
It's so good.
The other day, I saw that my mom on Instagram stories, which have never really seen her use Instagram, and then using the story feature.
Yeah.
She posted a complaint about a moving company that didn't show up to my sister's house on our moving day. And it was a whole Insta story rant about this moving company. No one's following my mom except me.
A spoken rant or
No, it was
she
like
typed
a
out the
written
words?
rant. No one ever used XYZ moving company. They didn't show up to my daughter's house when she was supposed to move. I was like, who is she talking to right now?
But it's like when you're so mad at something that you're like,
Get
what
it out,
other
man.
outlets do I have? Maybe someone will see this.
Oh,
Oh, totally.
Wild. All right. And then the final warm-up cue. If you had to be called a girl boss, lady boss, entrepreneur, power babe, or mogale, what would you choose?
And you have to do it sincerely.
I just blacked out.
I know. I know.
Come back to. Wave a little.
Like to describe yourself, think of that you have to use one of these terms at like a networking event.
Yeah.
I'm
Go
Kate
for
Kennedy.
it.
I'm a mogal.
I would I would sooner drop out of the conference.
Yeah. It'd be worth
Okay,
the risk.
You said boss babe, lady boss, entrepreneur, mogal.
Entrepreneur, power babe. I mean, the list is endless, really.
Oh, CEO should be on here.
Oh, yeah, CEO.
Oh, CEO. Yeah, if I had to pick one, I would probably pick girl boss just because it is so ubiquitous. And people, it's not like I went out of my way to make up a quirky name for myself. I think like mogal and entrepreneur are like a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Especially because you have to say it like that. I'm an entrepreneur.
Her. Entrepreneur. Her.
Yeah. Right. So I'd probably say girl boss, but I think anybody who knows me would think I was kidding.
Right.
So it might work.
All right, I guess we have to burn the embroidered T-shirt that says Mogal that we had made for you.
I think that's what I picked.
Just a bunch of mogals. We already worked it into every future question.
It's like we've made all our questions obsolete from here on out.
Rachel Hollis has a mogul tattoo, and I think that's what my aversion is, which is just so frustrating
really?
for her. Yeah.
But it's just mogul, not mogal. Like
I
emphasized.
think we made up mogal.
Yeah, no, I think we did, but I didn't know if she tried to play it
No,
off.
it is just regular mogul, though. I'm sure she'd curse the day if she heard your brilliant mogal. It is
She
good.
wished she had a hyphen.
Now I almost feel like it should be like mo girl, mogal.
I actually kind of like mo girl.
mo girl. But then I think it almost is too far removed in terms of.
One of the earliest sites on the World Wide Web for young ladies was gurl.com. And it was a play on like girl and URL. And I think about girl.com a lot. And I think that's why I like MoGirl, because I'm spelling it G-U-R-L.
Little throwback.
It actually works with M-O-G-U-L.
My brother-in-law and I went through a phase where we were like, we should buy URLs and squat on them and make a bunch of money. And we were trying to think of all the most basic ones that weren't taken. The only one we found was bread.net. We always talk about our bread.net fortune, like the one that got away because we never bought it. But maybe someone would have wanted to buy bread. Yeah. But anyway, girl.com sounds like bread.net to me.
I own buffalochickenwrap.com.
That's right.
Oh yeah, we've talked about that.
I own a lot of straw. I really thought we were going to double down as a society on plastic straw awareness. So I bought several straw ones. It still could happen.
Yeah. Didn't you say you also own like ranchrating.com?
Ranchrank.com.
Ranch Rank.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I want it to be a data mining service that mines all restaurant review sites specifically to pair dipping sauces with their sentiments. So you can just like get rid of all the fluff and just get right to
business.
The aiolis, the ranches, the
aioli.
Get right to ranch.
Yeah.
I heard that a big like URL squatting trend is to buy typo URLs.
Yeah.
So one that people have put in by accident. I guess those are huge.
I bought the typo to my name because I thought, if someone spells my last name wrong, the most common spelling is this, so I'm going to buy it so no one else gets to
I do think, though, we have clients ask us a lot about, like, well, we love, if we're, like, naming them, right? And they're like, I love this business name, but the URL isn't available. I don't think a lot of people put in direct URLs anymore. I think you put in the business name into Google. Like, I don't think it's as important, and I think you can get clever with it. But I feel like people feel that way. Like, I feel like it's more likely that someone would Google the wrong spelling of your name than they would be like www.Allie.
For sure. Absolutely.
For sure. Well, don't you remember like whitehouse.com?
Oh, yes.
So whitehouse.gov is the White House. But like if you do research projects, when we started getting on the internet in school, whitehouse.com was very much a porn site.
Oh my God, I remember. I haven't thought about that in so long.
Yeah. It happened to everybody. And it almost was this funny thing where people would almost mess with you because it wasn't blocked because they didn't know better at that time. But yeah, I mean, from what I remember, it like split out the government branches. Like there was specifics for judicial, legislative, executive.
Oh, like types of porn?
Yeah, like it was pretty on theme and clever, if I'm honest. You guys love a...
Yeah. Oh, love a parody. Parody.
Yeah. Sexual parody.
Yeah. We love a sexual parody.
Say anything about me. I love erotic parodies.
Yes, you do.
Well, I always laugh thinking that how many BDSM websites people have to get through to get to our agency name.
Oh, because of Obedient?
Obedient.
Oh, yeah.
Because when we get tagged on Facebook, or if we ever get notified that there's a tag, they're all mistakes, and it's often either like talking about religious obedience or sexual obedience, and we somehow get tagged in the process.
Or I think sometimes Facebook suggests, like sometimes people are just writing the word obedient.
Yeah.
Like not about us, and Facebook, it'll accidentally suggest a business page.
Yep, and we are the unlucky recipients.
We also had
guerrilla marketing tactic.
We have necklaces that say obedient.
Yes.
Which I think are gorgeous and very fun, and I think it's like, subversive to think of a woman wearing it, being obedient and all that. But people have been like, oh wow, dog collar, like as though I'm like
submissive.
Like, oh man, this is the opposite of
I'm gonna get mad at one that says dominant.
Yeah.
Oh boy. All right. So when we started this whole thing, kicked it off, we gave our listeners a little bit of a background into who you are, what you do. So let's just get right into it. What's a common misconception about what you do or your industry in general that you would like to clear up?
I think that most things I've done are objectively embarrassing. Starting a doormat company, writing a book about social media, starting a podcast, like an Instagram persona. These are things that require you to think highly of yourself and think you can do certain things, and things that other people do for leisure that is actually a lot of work. And I think people think that when I'm doing stories on Instagram, it's just like, it's not that necessarily that you want attention or you're sharing every part of your day or whatever, but like a consistent social media presence is an important part of building your persona and being consistent and being a part of people's day. That anything I want to set out to do as an individual is contingent upon my audience, and the ancillary things you do to maintain your audience don't always tie directly to revenue, don't always tie directly to your job. And I think people kind of trivialize Instagram. And similarly, I think people think everyone has a podcast and that podcasts aren't a lot of work. And then I go to sit at my mic for 2 hours a week and that's it. But like I'm essentially producing a 2-hour show. Like it's my full-time income. Like it takes so much time.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that, I don't know, I'm always fighting the urge to just tell people I'm an accountant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's just, these aren't jobs that if you're not familiar with them, you might think I'm just like a aimless millennial.
I remember when I met my boyfriend's parents, I really just wanted to be like, I wish I could just say I'm a nurse. Like, because the amount of follow-up questions they would have about so you run your agency. Well, who do you work with and or like all of these things. And that's even branding, marketing, advertising is even, I think, easier for like older generations to maybe understand. But yeah, to be like, I run a podcast, I run a social media, like it's
right.
It feels have like a lot of qualifiers you have to keep going. There's no like one statement except girl boss, which you chose earlier, which
which kind of encompasses everything. Well, it does. It feels very abstract, I think, to a lot of people, and hobby driven, like you said. Yes. So I think it's hard for people to fully comprehend that you can make a complete living out of those different mediums and platforms. So yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's also like, especially in terms of like influencing or social media, it's rare that a like career is something that other people think they dabble in.
Yeah.
So it's like that and many people who do that full time, it's like that's your full-time job, but someone's awareness is only based on their use of it. So they're like, I post food pics or pics of my kids or pics of my dog.
Yeah,
and so they're relating it in that way. They're like, this must be that. Whereas you're not finding that in a lot of other fields. People don't
doctor on the weekends.
Right.
It's like people romanticizing being like an event planner or a wedding planner. Like you're associating the career with the leisure and not the back end work. Right. Or when something becomes your job, it inevitably shifts. Like, everything's fun until you need to get paid doing it.
As someone who my first job out of college was an event planner, I thought it was going to be all the fun. This is a running joke in our friend group that I've had a lot of jobs throughout my career.
Did you watch Gilmore Girls ever?
No, I didn't.
Did you? Oh, God, you are a character on it. Kirk, if anybody's out there listening.
Oh, no.
He's the guy in town that works everywhere and has every job for a small period of time.
But I remember going into it thinking it was going to be party planning and all the fun, creative elements and aspects of it. I had no idea I'd be sitting at a desk doing like strategic, thoughtful planning and logistics for 95% of it until the day of the party.
And then not really enjoying the party.
No,
you're not like there to hang out.
You're running around the whole time making sure no one drops the ball and, hell doesn't break loose. So.
Right, absolutely. It's funny. Truly, your career breadth, depth. I mean, I learn something new about you all the time.
Every time we hang out, Allie tells you about a new job she had.
Yeah,
I feel.
Most notable being the Best Buy.
For sure.
Yeah, that was it was most iconic so far.
Most iconic.
Most self-decided iconic job. My most iconic if you ask me.
Iconic if you run it by me.
So this is sort of similar question, but a different spin. Is that like, what's an unpopular opinion you have about your industry or field? Like maybe a way that you like approach it differently or something you believe about it that doesn't like fit with popular belief.
Yeah, I think I feel like I seem like negative because I just said a lot of my career is objectively embarrassing, and then now I'm going to say something negative again. But actually I mean this in a good way. My podcast is everything that isn't super common or popular in podcast. It's long, it's not niche, and it's not co-hosted. And these are three things that I was up against a lot in terms of talking to networks and it being absorbed into, whether it's a podcast network or just like another, how there's like ad agencies and then there's actual like agencies that kind of will put their name with your podcast. Like I've talked with so many different companies over the past couple of years. So many have said it needs to be shorter, needs to niche down, all these things. But I just think you kind of have to look at something and be like, if this looks different than everyone else is it wrong? Or is it carving out a space?
Right.
And I felt even when I was small, the engagement was so high and it was something that I wanted to be doing because I think people are really hard on women about like talking too much. People trivialize women's interests. All of the things that I felt like these networks were telling me to do to be more similar to other podcasts were all the main reasons people liked me. And even though I could probably be bigger, if I pandered to that, I do think I have higher engagement because I find people that very specifically like this thing.
Do you honestly believe that you would be bigger if you pandered? Or do you think that the fact that you've gone rogue and differentiated yourself in terms of style and the way you approach topics has been a benefit?
I think I would be bigger in a sense that when it was earlier on and I just really wanted it to catch on, make money, I wanted it to like be something, I think I would have been tempted to go with like a women's podcasting network that would have promoted it and would have like been an arm that maybe would make it more efficient on the back end and would get me on other podcasts and like promote it in a different way. But that said, I actually am glad that I stuck with my guns primarily for ownership, if I'm honest, like being able to have full control over like topics and advertisers and all that. But yeah, I actually think in the past like 6 months to a year, it like finally fully shifted where I just like fully own it. I'm like, this is long.
Yep.
If you get something, if you have leftovers at a restaurant and you take it to go, you don't complain that they gave you too much. And I feel like when people complain about length instead of parse it out, they're really not for me anyway.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I feel like actually when I think of your brand, like the Be There in 5 K Kennedy brand, I do think that approach has become your niche, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Like not necessarily with topics, but with style.
Yes.
And I just think that is what has set you apart, because even though you've had these pushbacks, it's allowed you to, and I love when you joke that it's like the official podcast of like marathon training, arduous like yard work and long road trips.
Late night feedings. Like truly the things people tell me they do during it make me laugh, because I kind of started it in the reflection of what I needed at the time when I was self-employed and lonely, and like podcasts were my friend. They were my coworker. I don't listen to music. I listen to people talk.
Yeah.
And I love nothing more than like taking on, really serious chore and just listening to one straight through podcast that like goes deep. But I think a lot of people like quicker, quippier, like news that they can digest easily, but that's just not what I'm in it for. So
I listened to you talk about Britney Spears for 5 hours yesterday as I cleaned my entire place from top to bottom.
right?
5 straight hours marathon cleaning.
As you grimace, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a funny thing where I don't know if you guys feel this way. I never want like people that know me listening. I'm always so self-conscious because it's very much me, but it's also kind of a character of me that like is so earnestly speaking about this thing for so long that you can never do, obviously, conversationally.
Right.
But yeah, that was a deep dive, for example, that people had asked me to do for so long. I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to interview a lawyer. I'm going to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it was, in depth, but everybody's covered that topic. So again, this is the only thing I have to really stand out is like, I'm going to be exhaustive.
Right. And like analytical. It feels like that comedic plus analytical is an approach that is pretty like true to you, that I feel like your listeners know and love, right? That's like, I'm going to do that. What did you say? You talk about meaningless topics in a meaningful way.
Yes.
Like, I think that's great.
I think that the thing, like pop culture, lifestyle topics, celebrity gossip, like all these things in our ethos, like they matter, they move the needle, and entertainment sites kind of give you the top level of like what happened, but I'm very obsessed with like what it means and like what we can learn from it, or why people aren't talking about it right. And I also think a lot of personalities, like entertainment personalities, are known for their perspective and they're like hard and fast angle at something. But my angle is almost always to encourage people to embrace the gray, because I think we live in a very hyperbolic society that operates in extremes. And with Brittany, I'm like, I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, you did say that a lot.
I want people just to be like, here are all the sides, because I think people want answers, but I think that's almost the problem, or like where conspiracy theories get made up, is in this search for answers of situations we inherently can't know everything about. And I always want people to embrace that a bit.
So what else would you say, given all the things you've talked about in terms of like how you've niched down, the way you approach the various endeavors you've undertaken, what else would you say are like some common through lines in your brand? Because you talk about having a chaotic brand, but there seems to be like very consistent through lines that you see in everything that you get your hands dirty with.
Yeah, I think what you realize over time is that at the beginning when you're setting something up, you give it qualities, values, attributes to make it recognizable and palatable to other people, that if something similar they'd know. But the best is when you get to a point where your personality is just the brand. Like, I just feel like all the things I wanted to Be There in 5 to be, like I kind of, even in the name, it being like a nod to one of my flaws about punctuality. Like I try not to take myself too seriously, but I also want it to be like a really relatable place for women, because I'm not like a famous person. A lot of celebrities and stuff like start podcasts as offshoots of their existing audience, but I grew my audience through it. And I actually think that being a normal person is kind of a big part of it.
Yeah.
And I also think that like one of the through lines is talking about lifestyle type things, whether it's being in a sorority, our experience in like the True Love Waits movement. Like I'll do episodes about being a bridesmaid, things that aren't really pop culture, not really entertainment, but are aspects of the millennial ethos that I'm obsessed with reminiscing about because they're so funny and they're placed, like you can't really complain to your friends about being a bridesmaid and like the floral robes you're forced to wear in the call time at 8 a.m. But we all hate it.
Oh, yeah.
So I love talking about stuff like that where I can kind of go in and since I can't represent everybody's experience as a single host, I crowdsource stories. And that's like my favorite thing ever. So I can kind of represent a wide array of things. And I just like laugh till I cry to myself in my mic. And it's one of my favorite things to do because listeners feel like a part of it. It's either a deep dive about something in entertainment or like a crowdsourced deep dive about a lifestyle topic that's kind of specific to my, I guess, demographic.
Right. So because so much of what you do is crowdsourced, do you ever find it difficult to maintain like your perspective or that deeper integrity that remains true to who you are as a brand or the brand you've built, should I say?
Yeah, I think that when it's crowdsourced, it's almost by design to take away from my perspective because I feel like it's about a topic where it's just totally experience-based and it's not really about what I think.
Yeah.
So with Brittany, I brought in a probate attorney. I'll bring in the thing that supplements the thing I think I lack. And if it's representation, I'll bring in stories. If I feel like I have a really good grasp on this, I'll just talk by myself. But by design, it's really, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I listen to people talk and they're like so convinced of something and they've not even consulted anybody else's perspective.
Yeah.
And since I can't have people on all the time and like be bringing guests, it's just kind of a way I do it. But I almost think listeners like it, like that they're the experts of their own experiences, you know? So
I like that.
Kind of works.
It reminds me of something that I've always admired about like staying true to your brand is when people will ask you to do, well, I mean, I know sometimes they ask you to get a host or make them shorter, but I think they also will ask you to do deep dives on topics that either aren't in your wheelhouse, don't have your interest, or that you think someone else has already covered well. And I just think that's to me, like the trademark of a strong brand that knows itself is when you can be like, that's not for me, but this person has done, like to me, that confidence. And so like, I guess the question here is, how do you decide, is this a right project, episode, choice for the brand in terms of your books, your products, your episodes, everything?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of I have to be very like naturally I can't talk and research that much if there's not a fundamental interest level. I'll talk a lot about influencers, for example, and people want to gossip and snark on influencers. And I think whenever there's a controversy, they want me to go in on it. And that's a big one where I'll push back because I do think there's a line between lighthearted snark and being mean-spirited. And I also think that there's a lot of things like behavior I don't want to breathe life into. I think Caroline Calloway is an example of somebody everyone wanted me to talk about, but I never did because she deep dives on herself. Like I can't add value to that.
Right.
But, you know, I think people were shocked that I did a deep dive on Call Her Daddy. It's the most opposite of my brand.
Right.
But that story was so interesting to me because people misunderstood the business of podcasting and were calling them greedy. And I was like, no, they're so underpaid relative to their reach.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so I wanted to go in and explain that from like, firsthand experience. So I think I pick things that it's less about the topic and more about if I can add value or not. Because otherwise, like, what am I doing? Just regurgitating what other people said about it.
Right. And I think that is a difficult thing for a lot of people, like creatives and brands in general, to not just want to jump on bandwagons or be like, I guess I could sort of talk about this.
Yeah, and start to water down their brand and dilute their ethos or what they care about because they think that they need to get involved in everything because that's what's going to make them more marketable or
Right. Like if something is being so ubiquitously talked about, I probably am not going to do it.
Yeah.
Because I think that I really, really try not to pander. Like I really try to keep it a little bit unpredictable. And because part of my whole shtick is like, I think that people are multifaceted. They have a wide variety of interests and I can't really put myself in a box, nor do I want my listeners to put themselves in a box. So I kind of live for finding something that people probably don't think I'm going to go into. Yeah. And that's like part of the fun for me. Is it being like a smidge unpredictable?
Right. I know something you said earlier that I wanted to sort of like revisit or keep talking about. The idea of, I feel like everybody has this in the back of their brain of like, I could be bigger if like fill in the blank. And I think, of course, like the whole point of having a business is to like make money and succeed and like leave your mark and all of those things that everyone desires. But I just don't think that that's in and of itself a like strong enough goal, I guess, because I think
noble enough.
something we talk about a lot is like, you could maybe have more success if XYZ, but what would your days look like? Or how would you feel about what you were bringing to the world? So I think there's all these like other questions that are important to ask, because you could make your anything more broad and potentially reach more people, but then
and more palatable to the masses. Yeah.
Right. And I think when it comes to like branding businesses, for us, it's always like, yeah, you could maybe reach more people at first, but then they're not going to have loyalty to you because they won't remember you because there wasn't a unique experience they had with you. They're just like, those are the guys that did roofing and floors and they clean, but I mean, that's an example of something people do both of, but
they do
we do actually.
I still like construction work. But maybe a better example of that, you know what I mean? Where you're like, I don't know, the jack of all trades.
Yeah. I always think of it like reach isn't necessarily the goal, like for every industry.
Yeah.
And reach can actually be a big problem at a point, because I think that especially in something where you kind of have like listeners, followers, fans, the bigger you get, inevitably your engagement goes down. And I do think people have to fight the concept of like the people that saw you in the basement, like the garage band, the person that saw you in underground clubs, and then you get on TRL and they like are mad because you went mainstream or sold out, you're not sellout, accessible. I think that is a big thing that people don't realize when that turns to like hate follows and like resentful fans, and that's an area I never want to get into. But I do think that like I'm definitely a person that would rather have 10,000 people spend $100 on me a year to make $1 million than 100,000 people spending $10 on me a year. And I think that I actually, to your point now, I would be a little fearful of being like the level where I feel misunderstood because people aren't putting that much thought into me or who I am or what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And like as far as like my priority in life, I hate feeling misunderstood.
Totally.
And so to become the boilerplate caricature of myself that people would describe at too high of a level, I would be incredibly uncomfortable with it, I think.
Right. Because I even think you are definitely like a personality and a brand like in one. But I even think just like businesses that are brands, people want to have a relationship with a thing that is like helping their lives, changing their lives, even if they're not associating with like us individual person.
I feel deeply connected to in some way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we like teach what we call like a brand personality for brands, because it's like you want there to be an emotional exchange. You want there to be an emotional connection.
There to be familiarity, consistency.
Right.
Because you know what you're going to get.
Because then it's not just commodified. You know what I mean? Because I think if you got to that place or that echelon, maybe then they're just like, they don't see you as you anymore. It's just something you can give them. And that's when I think people start hate following, or that's when that relationship is broken a little bit. I'm sure that works for some people, but it just depends on like your quality of life and your career, how you want to feel about it every day.
It can be like a quantity versus a quality play.
Right.
Like if you build your brand and you really care deeply about building relationships and loyalty and an energy exchange and a give and take, and people are ride or die for you, like those people will be there with you long term, as opposed to people who just like tap in and out because you just seem semi-approachable and I might dip my toe in the water. Then they're not invested in who you are or your brand. Right. And I think it's so much easier to turn on someone that you're not invested in.
Oh, totally. And I think that even just the nature of being a solo host, the intimacy of being in somebody's ears for 2 hours a week, and how much I've said the past 2.5 years, like it always amazes me how much people know me. And even when I meet people, I'm like, actually, you do have like a very good grasp. Like I think, it's kind of an interesting thing where I actually appreciate that people feel like a friendship almost with the other side of the mic because we've spent so much time together.
Yeah. Right. That actually leads me to a question about like who you are behind the brand. Is there a personality trait or quirk about you that someone wouldn't know from listening to your work? Because obviously you're not, I think that's another misconception about people who are brand personalities or hosts or influencers, is that people think they know everything about you. Right. So that's the other side of the coin, right? Is you're like, you're right on a lot of these things that I've chosen to share with you, but that's maybe this much of my life. And so I know that you're also like big on privacy and all of that stuff. So what do you think is something, or do you think there's something that people wouldn't know about you from listening to your work?
I think that somebody who's started a business and written a book and started a podcast and like has kind of made things from scratch, you would think is very meticulous and type A. But I'm so type B that I almost think I'm successful because I'm not a perfectionist. Because if I sought out to do any of those things perfectly, it wouldn't have happened. But I'm like comfortable trying things and dropping them. I'm comfortable doing minimum viable products that I pivot till they get better. I think that people misunderstand the type of personality it takes to do something on your own. And I actually think being more laid back kind of works in my favor. But to that point, I think because I'm analytic, people probably think that I'm kind of meticulous and type A and organized, but like I'm problematically disorganized. I'm very scatterbrained. And you're like, maybe people, all of you are like, yeah, we know. But I do
Preaching to the choir over here.
I think that I'm like resourceful and like on top of things, but I also think that I'm maybe way more laid back in a lot of ways than people know. And beyond that, I don't talk to like my family and friends about the things I talk about on the podcast. I think people probably think everywhere I go, I'm like, let's talk about folklore. Like, Greg and I have maybe talked about it once.
Well, when you come here, in all fairness.
Well, yes, that's why I love our crew that listens to songs and talks about pop culture and lyrics, because I created the podcast for that space. Like, I think there's an intellectual, engaging way you can talk about pop culture in a way that doesn't trivialize what it means to people. And we like earnestly sit around and talk about lyrics.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
And it's so that's why I just think that's like a magical thing to have in friendships that I never have because I didn't have interests shared with my husband or my friends. So that's, I feel like podcasts are a breeding ground for shared interests.
Right.
So it's funny. I actually that's where I get out all the things I wish I was talking about, not the things I'm actually talking about behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, I like that.
It does make me laugh, like when I think about our Allie and my podcast Fangasm, all of the like sponsorship deals we get asked to do are all like pretty hardcore sex stuff.
Oh
But we're like, this is first and foremost a comedy podcast. Yes, it's erotic like stories, but they're even an erotic fan fiction is already going to be pretty ridiculous because people are imagining these scenarios that never happen on the screen or on the
with
page.
fictional characters.
And we ended up, not doing ads and really like building sort of like a deep following on Patreon because we were like, the three of us who host it, like while we do talk about sexual content, it's always comedic. And the three of us actually grew up pretty sexually conservative or like people were like, do it for this new like 12-inch dildo, and we're like,
I know,
it's just as interesting that the point I'm trying to make is that people hear a type of topic and make decisions about it and think, or like are dismissive about things. Would be like, oh, pop culture, or oh, Taylor Swift, that's just this, and you're like, right, but
they think it's frivolous.
Yeah, right. Or your listeners might, if they came over to hang out with you guys. And you weren't like always making pervy jokes.
They would think we're like hypersexual.
But like you guys don't.
Really not.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And that's what's so funny. And so I kind of man the inbox for Fangasm, and I can't even tell you how many times, even this week, or I guess last week, I had to fire off a couple emails like, hey, I know we definitely do talk about sex, but we are first and foremost a comedy podcast, and no, we won't be advertising your butt plugs and new edible thongs on our podcast.
Right. I think
Thank
you so much for the kind
shock and
it's
surprise
sex,
people.
but there's so many layers, or there's so much nuance to these topics that people just imagine are this one thing.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
of course that would be a great sponsorship for someone who was giving sex advice or for whatever. Or we could do that and do it funny if we wanted to. But like you have to make all these little decisions of, I think as a brand, you go, is this inching us towards like the perception, the goal, the listenership, the consumership that we ultimately want to have? Is this telling that story in that way? And it just didn't feel integral, or didn't feel like on brand, I guess.
Yeah, it wasn't, because our through line is comedy. Our through line is humor and levity and lightheartedness and entertainment, and that felt like it detracted a little bit from it. So yeah.
Well, because the point is that stuff isn't that funny to people who are comfortable with it. The hilarity is the discomfort and the kind of the disconnect between, to me at least, because I'm not even like, I just feel like I struggle to even like say certain words.
Oh yeah.
That like, I'm just amazed that you guys can speak so fluidly. Oh God, terrible
Speaking
words.
of what we do not say off when we're not recording Fangasm.
Most of the most explicit content we read or words we use, none of us would ever say.
Yeah, right.
We'd never say it outside the story.
That's why it's funny. It's shocking.
There's things we talked about in the stories that we didn't even know what they were, and we had to Google them as we are recording because we're like, I've never even heard of this.
Yeah, the characters in our stories are way more sexually adventurous than all three of us like combined. I always have to have them like, they'll be doing things and I'm always like, I need like a chart. I'm like, who's where? Who's on first? like,
Totally.
What are those body parts?
I was like, but how are her hands also on the ground? And Allie and Dan are like, well,
There's wooden the things they sell in like science museum gift shops. They're like wooden
they have all the
that have all the. What are those?
Yeah. like an anatomy model or something.
Yeah. What do I do?
I do think though, like people in general, when they're building brands or building something creative, maybe shy away from nuance because you want people to like understand you at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And so similar, like it's like, I think the way that you talk about pop culture and the zeitgeist, or even like influencer culture, doesn't have that like gossipy, tabloidy snarkiness that I think people would maybe imagine just because that's your subject matter.
Or understand because that's what they're used to. Yeah.
Right. So I just think I think it's a good muscle to flex to try to like embrace a nuance or embrace like obviously like a way you're differentiating from this larger topic and help educate and like lead with that foot to help people understand like what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to your point about the not being mean part's big for me because I almost want to make it cool I always say like, I'll talk about people's behavior, but I won't talk about their looks, their family, their kids. Mm-hmm. And I think as public figures, your behavior is on the table. But when people start to go into, I don't know, things that just aren't relevant to the end product they're providing or whatever, that's when I think it gets a little unfair. They think your husband looks weird or they speculate about your family dynamic or it's not interesting to me. But if somebody like Ariel Charnas is, has COVID and is like gallivanting around the Hamptons, like I'm going to talk about that.
Right.
And I think that's fair game. But yeah, some of the like snark out there, I just think is so out of line. And the difference between influencers and celebrities is that you don't have a buffer, you don't have team, you don't have people, you don't have PR. Like celebrities' fame is contingent upon their mystique. Influencers' fame is contingent upon their transparency. So they're so open with you that when I just think people don't realize the meaner you are to them, they're just reeling it in and they're not going to give anymore.
Yeah.
And that's when that disconnect I think happens too is like, you were almost like, I gave you so much.
Right.
And it just feels like a lot of give and not a lot of get,
Yeah.
I think, when people are that open with you about their life.
Yeah, it feels like Be There in 5 as a brand. I feel like something you avoid are cheap shots, right? Because I think you have a thoughtfulness to all the way that you approach things. I think it's helpful.
Deep empathy too.
We do this all the time with Obedient is like, what's our litmus for like, does this feel right for us? Does this feel like not right? Would we say yes? And usually ours is ridiculousness. So it's like, is this absurd? Is this offbeat?
Yeah,
Would another
unorthodox,
branding agency say this on their homepage?
Yeah.
That's like our like pulse check.
Yes.
And so do you have one, like a pulse check?
I actually don't. We were talking about earlier how when you edit your own audio, the more you listen, the less funny you become. And I think that's I get really tired of myself. And that's like a big problem for me. But I was telling them my philosophy is like a Scantron form. When you're tempted to go back and change all the bubbles, you shouldn't. Like your instincts are better. I do think the first pass of an episode or the first way I describe something is usually the best. And I almost have to have discipline with that, even if I don't like it that much. And I think, because if you're editing yourself, you could always say it better. You could always be more articulate. So I think that's kind of a funny thing where if anything, my threshold is the first way I said it is probably the best because I'll think of a funnier joke later.
Right.
But sometimes I think the off the cuff is better than like the craft or the bit of like,
Right. That reminds me of, and you have a background in copywriting too, like it reminds me of when we do copy for clients or design for clients, and we've had to be really meticulous about how long they get to edit something, how long they can pour over it, because it's already hard to stand by something, to put it in words, to put it in colors, to put it, but then when it's a risk, when it's funny, when it's like, if we give clients too long, they lose because then they'll look at it again, or they'll show their husband, or they'll ask a friend who's not their target audience, and then they're like, well, I don't know. Now that I look at this
get
word,
in their heads. It's like idle hands are the devil's playground. When we give our clients too much runway to give feedback, that's when they start to second guess and doubt. They start to default to playing it safe.
Yes.
And then you have to it ends up being like a coaching call where you're like, okay, well, remember what we set out to do together. Remember what our goal was, what our aim was. Because then the outside forces start to influence your decision-making capabilities. And I think that's what happens with people in branding is that the output becomes mediocrity. So.
Oh, for sure. I don't think we're always the best judge of our own ideas, and I don't always think you need other people's input.
Yeah.
Like I guess the other example too would be the only way I would edit out something is my references are often too specific.
Yeah.
I thought of that while you guys were talking. I was like, that's actually one where I draw the line sometimes is a lot of my humor is like dropping in a pop culture reference. But if it's too narrow, I'm trying to think of an example, but like.
Hey, I noticed that. I said that to Lindsay before you got here. I said, it's so funny how she could pull these really niche specific pop culture references that like I get, but I would have never thought of in 1,000 years, just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
They're just.
Well, it's funny. It's how I think.
Like what compartment in your brain is
and
that
I don't
stored?
know.
I think it's because she's analytical. I think it is. We're convinced that your Enneagram wing is a 5.
Yeah,
not a 3.
interesting.
I mean, and you use obviously both. You're very entrepreneurial with the 3 wing, but to me, that would say someone who has like gone so deep on all of the details of, or maybe not the details, but like you know what I mean, of a story that lodged in your brain. I don't know. It makes all the sense to me in the world that you'd be able to pull that.
I think it's memory too. I think I just have a good memory. Not to like flex.
Yeah.
But
okay, cocky.
Wow. We didn't bring you on this podcast to show your ego.
No, but I think that I really, to our point earlier about like if you had a stricter upbringing or like if things were limited, the way I experienced the world was like TV and movies and music. Yeah. And I have such sensory attachments to pop culture related things that I think that's why I'm able to tap into them. And if like, I'm trying to think of an example so people know, like if I say, like, I hope this episode has better turnout than Jodie Sawyer. You would have to remember that in center stage, the lead character's name is Jodie Sawyer, and she had horrible ballet turnout. So you would have to like really think through like 4 layers of joke, and then I move past it quickly. So I leave in those sometimes because it's not, if you don't catch it, you haven't lost anything. If you do catch it, you've gained a lot.
Right.
So
you
I
catch
think
it,
about
it's
that.
the best joke you've ever heard.
Right.
Yeah. So because, kind of to your point about upbringing, can you see any elements of your childhood or upbringing or maybe kid personality that has led to this work?
Yeah, actually, on last week's episode, I talked about popular girl handwriting. And I was laughing at how many people resonated with that because I actually think my doormat career has nothing to do with me being entrepreneurial and everything to do with me doodling K through 12 and wanting to have this certain type of handwriting all the girls had. And I wrote everyone's notes and made their binder covers and did all the pep rally banners. And like, I just had this weird niche of lettering my whole life that when I was tasked with like, I want to put this phrase on a doormat, I was just able to paint it myself.
Yeah,
that's a skill no one uses. So
especially now.
Yeah, I always notice these small characteristics of my personality become through lines because I think you're drawn to the things you like and you pursue them.
Yeah.
Or I was tortured as a kid because I wrote poems a lot, hence barometric pressures. And
again, stay tuned to the end of the episode.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that like you always come back to those things. And when I published a book that was an 82-line poem, and like my hometown paper wrote about it, I was like, the last time I was in this paper was October of 2000, and I got tortured in 7th grade for winning a poetry contest that I didn't know they were going to publish my poem.
No.
And it was about inner beauty.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look at you, a pioneer. Love yourself, girl.
It was just like, it doesn't matter what you look like. Yeah. It was like very much how I felt at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, like everyone reads it. And it was mortifying. And I just had such a moment of vindication of like being back in the paper and having the thing that people made so much fun of me for is the very reason.
I love that.
Yeah, it was my big break. Like I've always wanted to write. That's what the poem is what got me the publishing deal.
You, like me, were like 100 feet tall when you were 8.
Yes.
Yeah. And I just stopped growing at some point. But
right. Like, because now I feel like, what are you, 5'9"?
5'8".
Yeah, I'm like somewhere around there. And that's like a height that's not crazy tall as an adult. But if you're that tall when you're 12, it is stark.
You're like a teacher. You're taller than your
like
teachers.
Right.
It's horrifying.
Right.
But
like I just, and I think I just even look at pictures of myself growing up and I'm just always like slumped. I'm like always just wanting to be teeny, like pocket girlish. So I just think I'm grateful that I wrote out my feelings from a young age. When they were published, it was embarrassing, but I actually think that's a big reason of why I can like dig deep is because I tend to need to get it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's I guess drawing and having a lot of feelings and rhyming are my through lines.
I mean, who would have thought that you could make a composite of all of those things and build a career around it? It's fantastic.
Exactly. Know thyself.
Wait, okay, something that I feel like is a topic that's interesting that we were just talking about was I think because people are afraid of someone not liking the creative choices they're making, they want to water it down, broaden like the scope, maybe make it a little more average, I guess. And what's that quote we love so much? Like, your best work can never appeal to the masses. And so anyway, when you were talking about the things you want to cut or like your dog in the background, I think it's important when you're building a brand to remember that the goal should not be to please everybody.
Right.
It should like, and we often say that the worst thing a consumer or your audience could feel would be indifferent.
Yeah.
And like, I think if you use that as a guiding light, it helps you go, these things are sort of, maybe they feel weird or it feels uncomfortable. I'm feeling resistance because I know other people wouldn't do this. I think if you commit to them, that's when you find this like fanatic audience
that loves it. Well, it's like we always say, we're big fans of polarization. Like, you want people to either love you or know you're not for them. Like that's the best reaction we think you can have.
That's why podcasts are awesome. If you hate me, you can't listen to me talk for 2 hours. You just can't.
Turn me out.
So I just know the people that are there want to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think to your point about leaving stuff in, what I love about reality shows that I think they do not leverage enough is breaking of the fourth wall. I love behind the scenes. I love a blooper. I love a fourth wall broken. I love inside baseball. So I'll talk actually about the business of podcasting a lot, or like I'll kind of go a little inside because I think people are interested and they'd rather hear that than assume I'm a professional operation. Yeah. It's kind of part of the charm is like, I'm not a professional operation.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, people want, I think the tides have turned, and I think trends come and go in that regard. Sometimes people want a total polish, and it also depends on what industry you're in, what the expectation is from your audience.
What you're talking about, what the expertise is.
But like, my favorite thing that we ever do is have blooper reels at the end of things, because I feel like I'm at my most creative or my best or my funniest when I don't feel like it has to be perfect.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is us as founders when we're doing this, not when we're like, hello and welcome to Brandsplaining. You know, and I do think that podcasting helps you tap into some of those unscripted moments if you let yourself not like over-edit or control.
I also still think like you can insert your personality and it can be not as scripted, be a little bit more off the cuff and still be completely professional, and you take someone seriously as a brand. Right. I don't think that means your brand is sloppy or that there's not a quality there. I think as long as it doesn't compromise quality in terms of the experience with your brand, I think it adds to the charm, and it's dynamic and it's human. And I think we all want that more human connection. So
for sure.
I delight in that.
I like actively try to podcast when I'm hungover. I think that's when I'm the funniest.
Oh my gosh. Yes. When I'm hungover, I get in Caleb calls them the hangover sillies.
Yes.
Because I'm just like, well, what about, like, I just feel like anything. I feel like a loosey-goosey little like.
We've talked about that before. Is we always said that there was never a time when we were funnier than the morning after a night out when all your friends would wake up together and everyone is on fire and you're bantering, you're funny, and it's like, what is that special sauce?
I don't know. And those are the times things come out of your mouth. Like, I don't think most people get the experience of recording themselves when they're at a very funny moment. And it's not, I guess funny is maybe the wrong word, but like, there's this one episode where I was like on the verge of vomiting and I talked for 10 minutes about, I'm like, have you ever seen a blue raspberry? What is that? It's a flavor of everything that is a made-up fruit. And
that's my least favorite color of candy. I'll throw them away. The blue Skittles and the wildberry Skittles.
Yeah, blue raspberry.
I love
and
it
does have a distinct flavor.
It's so distinct, but what's the origin?
Is it a blackberry? Is it like a raspberry with a little bit of a blackberry?
It's a blue raspberry. Like,
no, Ellie, it's a blue raspberry.
I looked this up. It has no origin.
Wow.
It's just like it got picked up. It's my favorite flavor, Airhead.
Wow.
And there's going to be some beef on this pod now.
Great.
Sorry, tensions are high.
Oh, we have, because of our blue raspberry differences. You like red?
And I don't like
candy.
No,
I like white. I like the white mystery or whatever it was called, the white one.
You know, those are all the same flavor.
Yeah.
Or is it watermelon?
I don't know what it is, but it's never a mystery. But that's the one I like.
I'm sure everyone came to this podcast here to talk about mystery.
I could have a whole candy only, candy and snack only podcast. We know this.
Oh, yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts about candy. We'll see.
Stay tuned after the episode.
If anyone's listening and they run a candy brand or
listen to my new podcast, Sugar Rush by Lindsay Rush.
Oh, my little sister's Hotmail address.
That's a good
Sugar
one.
Rush.
Oh, I do love screen names too.
Oh yeah. Except the most embarrassing thing is my screen name from back then is my current email address. So people are always like, let's play the funny game of what stupid name you had. And I'm always like, the one I
am today in my mid-30s.
It's clever, to be fair.
Okay, before we play our ending game,
yes.
I think we have one last question. Al, want to tee it up?
So what is a no that you're really glad you gave and you still stand by?
I think I learned through the doormat business. Early on, there were a lot of shiny offers from retailers and stores that were like names. I remember like when I was a month or two in, it's exciting when a brand like a Gilt, remember how big Gilt was, G-I-L-T?
Huge. Oh, yeah.
And like Rue La La, and like all these sites were reaching out and they were like, we love your doormats. And I was like, oh my God, I thought it was so cool. They were acknowledging me. You almost want to legitimize what you're doing by having a third party get it on board. And then there would be offers like Jill's Steals and Deals on Good Morning America, or like these things would come my way that would theoretically get you a lot of reach, but would cut into the margins so deeply, I'd lose money on it. And
ultimately, it was a bad business decision.
Yes. And I actually think that I turned down a lot of stuff that people are tempted by that kept me afloat, because retailers gouge manufacturers. And if you are a small operation, you legitimately cannot scale to sell at a big box, to sell on a couponing site. Even if I went on Good Morning America, the volume that would have yielded, I would have had to build up a supply chain to even justify doing that. And then that volume would have dropped off.
Yeah, those
and
are,
then I would be stuck with the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I think people, they overextend themselves to make one niche situation work. And I did that one time with Nordstrom. Their margins are insane. Like a typical Keystone markup is 50%. They want to make like 80, 90. And it's absolutely would have put me under. And I actually wanted to sell Nordstrom and did, but I had to understand like EDI, like inventory, electronic digital inventory systems. I had to set up this whole like wholesale shipping freight operation that I ultimately never used for anything else. And I realized they were taking too much money. It wasn't worth it for me. And I pulled out.
And you were hand painting these, right?
These actually at the time were manufactured.
They were.
When I moved on to a manufacturing model, but it wasn't worth it. And I think now I actually my instinct is no over yes. And I think I used to be the opposite. And I'm just I'm proud of not giving up ownership of my podcast. I'm proud of not giving away 30, 40% of my ad revenue, to have somebody else legitimize it. I think now I'm comfortable with I don't need a third party platform to make what I'm doing seem legitimate. It's as legitimate as I make it.
Right.
Because it has the quick hit. And again, it feels like you're doing something, legitimize it initially, and then you're stuck with all the repercussions of that. They tend to not be loyalty consumers.
Right.
I worked,
There we go.
I was a VP of engagement at a startup where it was one of the first subscription box models to come onto the market. And we used to partner with brands, and they would give us their product for free, and with the idea that we were going to mass market them when we advertised our box and shipped them out to consumers. And it just, it sounded like a really sexy, cool idea initially, but then people were only in it for just the quick hit of it's just a trial. They saw it as just a trial. I want to try out this new product. There was no real follow-up from the consumers in terms of becoming, return customers or making additional future purchases. The lifetime value was very low.
Yes.
And so, I think people realize it's just not a great model, especially because at the time we probably had 100,000 monthly boxes that were being purchased. So that's 60 to 100,000 free products that you have to give away just hoping that it turns into something.
Yes.
And we were promising, and we did deliver in terms of getting them advertising and placement in media publications, et cetera. But I can't imagine looking back that was worth it.
Yeah.
I think these brands even exist for the most part anymore, which is terrible.
Yeah. Something taking off and being popular is the dream, but you have to be able to fulfill. And that's the touch and go of which comes first.
Yeah.
I think I was lucky with Etsy. There's a default expectation that it's handmade and there will be more of a lag time. So when my mats took off and I didn't have a supply chain, I just had 4 weeks to build it out. But the demand was so high because the customer's first point of interaction with your product is their highest propensity to convert. And I think that I was doing something so different that they actually were willing to give me the lag time that wouldn't happen normally with another product that you could just go somewhere else and get.
Right.
I got ripped off like crazy in that month, which was a horrible thing. But it was an interesting experience. And when something kind of goes viral, it gives you the focus group of a lifetime to see the comments and the likes and stuff that you would pay thousands and thousands of dollars to get otherwise.
It does feel like these days, and we have clients say this to us sometimes with ad campaigns, they're like, I just need something to go viral. Or you're like, this is no longer, one, it's nearly impossible to predict.
The whole point is that
it was a surprise.
Like viral is, it's a surprise it's not planned for. Yeah.
And it's just not always, I don't know, it doesn't always end up turning into like, you are dealing with perception, you're dealing with like maybe lack of retention. Like I don't know. It's just funny. People like there's like shiny object syndrome where you're like, if only. It's like the old antiquated, like old Hollywood, like I just need my big break. I'm just going to like be singing on the street corner and somebody be like, hey kid, you've got something. And you're like, oh, thanks.
Everyone wants a Justin Bieber moment.
Like a model in a mall.
Yeah. Who's on a limited 2 window? Exactly. With braces. That's Lindsay Roche.
Well, I think this will pivot into a whole different conversation that we don't have to, get into right now. But I do think that's where people who are often in business, they want the quick return. They don't want to do the work. So they want that virality. They want it to happen instantly, because churning out good work or good products or good offerings over time doesn't feel as sexy. But like that, I think, is the biggest flaw in building a business, is people who are consistent and who keep going and keep pushing through when it's difficult or challenging. Those are often the brands that make it, not the ones that just pop on your shelves and are in and out.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, are you a Hamilton or are you a Burr? I wait for it. Like, I'm okay with a slow burn. I'm okay with like slow and steady building over time. I sit back and watch. I'm not aggressive. But like, I'm much more have long-term strategy in mind, which isn't sexy. It's not fun.
Yeah.
But it just depends.
And like, I think when you really, really believe in what you're doing or the way you're doing it, you're much more comfortable waiting or for a slow burn. Because like when we say no to certain, in the beginning, we said so many no's because we were dealing with clients from both of ours, from our past work, who were like a lot of times fun and funny stuff, but not necessarily like strategic humor. And so
they wanted good. They didn't want fun, entertaining personality.
Yeah, they're like, we just want it good. And it was enticing to just be like, oh, we could, on-ramp all these clients. And suddenly we're like super successful in, the first 6 months. But you're like, you have to break down like, this is cheesy, but like what success means to you. And so I was like, to us, if we are purposely wanting to build a brand that brings levity and humor into the world and uses that as the key strategy, we have to stick with that.
You have to be selective,
You have to be selective and say no. And
your portfolio would become things that don't reflect your values.
We always said that if we wouldn't want it to be a portfolio piece, we can't do the work. Because then, but it's not aligned with our brand, and you start to lose integrity in terms of who you are, what you stand for. And I'm sure we all know that when you're working on a project, it doesn't matter how much money you make, when it is misaligned with a thing that excites you, it is a slog. It's just an energy suck. So,
and I think like we would have just been working at another agency if we wanted to do whatever kind of work. You know what I mean? If you want to be like removed from it or just like do some fun. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with people who choose that. But like,
for sure,
if we were going to go on the limb to build an agency from scratch, we're going to do it so that it was work we felt good about and we're excited about.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I think that you almost need to manage expectations to do what you do, that there's a level of irreverence that you have to be comfortable with, come in with.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, you couldn't even have fun with the outlandish ideas. Like an Ogilvy, you can't do, I mean, you know what I mean?
There's so many constraints.
There's so many constraints.
And I mean, I think a huge part of what we have to do with new clients, because a lot of people will be like, yep, I'm ready. Let's take some risks. Let's make a splash. I'm ready to be funny. And you're like, well, first of all, funny means a million different things to different people. And it actually doesn't matter what it means to you. It matters what it means to the audience you're trying to reach, and like what emotion you want to stir up and what action you want them to take and all that stuff. But I feel like there's a lot of coaching, or a lot of our prep work is like, be prepared for when this part happens, or like to resist what it feels like to want to dial it back, or to compare it to something else, or to, I mean,
we have to do a lot of like getting people emotionally prepared to go through our process.
Yes.
Because, there's often a resistance once they get in. Not generally too much, but we do have to bring people back quite often. So we try to get ahead of like what we think the pushbacks will be, or the concerns, or the reactions, so that the final product is this awesome, amazing, memorable, audacious thing that no one else in their industry would have created. So
for sure.
Well, and I think with anything, like with your brand, with your show, I think being unique takes so much courage. Because even people that, I think it's really easy to get swept up in like emulating other people's styles, other people's like ways of doing things. So you're like, I want to be successful like that, or I want to be adored like that, or I want, all these things. But that worked for them because they are them. You know what I mean? Because
and it was unique for them.
Right. So I don't know. I think it's just so interesting when people are creating to be like, has this been done before? I think about songwriters all the time and how you would come up with a hook and you'd be like, yes. And then you'd be like, oh, and that's Whitney Houston. Like, you know, like how to like originality is so fascinating to me because we're creatures of like our environment. Especially now we're inundated with so many different messages and words. Like we'll write something for a client or write something for ourselves and have to like frantically Google to be like, is that ours? Like, or we'll find things in our Slack and I'm like, did we say that
Did we
first?
say that? Or have we heard that?
It's really hard.
Oh yeah. I think it's only human to store something. It's, you know, you're not a living works cited page. Like, I don't know where I heard things or how I assembled them. And because, you don't want to be like a Rachel Hollis plagiarist, like a person that's taking very common colloquialisms or quotes and being like.
Changing one word and then being like, dash obedient.
Exactly. That drives me insane.
Just because you put it in your own brand colors and you change the first and the last word.
You're like changing the conjunction.
Took a
You're
Maya
like,
Angelou quote.
Oh gosh, no, I didn't know that.
I mean, you know, quote thievery on Instagram is one of my pastimes. Like I want to be a private eye. I want to bring them all down. I will look. I follow certain like. It always happens with like boutiques, like shops, or wellness brands that have coaches a ton, but that I'll see and I'll be like, they haven't quoted anybody, but I know that that's a joke they found on Twitter. You can see it. And then I'll go and search on Twitter and sure enough, find that it was like 2 years ago. And so my issue, well, here I am at my soapbox. My issue, and they'll go, I couldn't find it, right? So I'm like, okay, well, let's say that is true. Then at the very least, you should put unknown because you not putting anything implies you want people to make the assumption that it is you. It's when people like take screenshots of certain things. I'm like, I get there are some things that are really hard to trace back. But if you've removed the credit, if it
didn't come from your brain, you know you didn't write it.
Right. And you should go out of your way to be like unknown. Because if you put it in your own brand colors, the assumption is this person created that. And I share it and
it perpetuates it. I was at a conference one time and the speaker on stage, he quoted Abraham Lincoln and the crowd roared like it was his own quote. And he stood there and just soaked in the audience reaction. And he never cited Abraham Lincoln. I'm sitting there going, why do I know that quote? It's so familiar to me. And I Google, and it's a Lincoln quote. I'm like, all of you people in the audience now look. And I'm not going to say who it was, but he's a very popular mainstream podcast host. And again, he's just added value to his brand and he's perpetuated this idea that he's an intellectual thinker and enlightening and, moving mountains mentally for people. And it was one of our forefathers.
That is like horrible. And it's like, is it worse if he doesn't know that those aren't his words or if he does?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like, that drives me insane. I just think, quote attribution in general is like a hilarious, like, thing that everyone thinks Audrey Hepburn or Marilyn Monroe said everything.
Right.
Or Eleanor Roosevelt.
Or Mae West.
Mae West, yes.
Yeah.
And it's been an issue since AIM Buddy Info. But I feel like the aesthetic, quote, Pinterest world has just made this horrible. Or there's a lot of easy jokes too. And sometimes I'm like, anyone could have thought of that. And I said the same thing as a million other people. Like when Folklore came out, I think 9,000 people on Twitter were like, finally, the indie record, that's much cooler than hers.
Yeah.
You know, but it's not, I don't know. I think that's tricky too. And if there's anything I never, ever want to do, it's like take somebody else's jokes. It's so embarrassing.
Well, right. And there are times, especially like in the off the cuff world of Instagram stories and Twitter, where I do believe that probably dozens of people logged on and at the same time said that, right?
Yeah,
so to
totally
them,
possible.
that was their original thought. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think a lot of times with our work, with our clients, we're like, if you're resting your hat on the fact that humor is the basis, you cannot stick with your first instinct joke. Like that, if that's the first reference you thought of, it's likely that everyone else has thought of that. And so if surprise is such a huge part, that's like the point of a punchline, right? Surprise is the crux of humor, but it's like a mix of surprise and relatability. Because in order for things to be very, very funny to people, they have to find them true or related. And they go, that's
the truth.
They go, they go, that's me. That's so true. You know, like that's like Jerry Seinfeld. You'd be like, why have I never thought about how sliding doors work? You know, like, but that's why it's hard. I think the point I'm trying to make is that originality is difficult and people are either striving for it or just want to take the easy way out.
Right. Like if the joke is about something universal, it's sometimes misunderstood that the joke itself is universal.
Yeah, right. It's still an insight that was smart. I feel like that happens in Twitter a lot where people are like quote tweeting with trying to punch it up, or people maybe are like, yeah, anyone could have thought of that. And you're like, you think that now because you read it.
Exactly.
But you didn't think it.
Right.
So let's keep that in mind.
But you didn't, Lincoln.
Okay, so this is the first time we will have played this game.
Oh, I'm so excited.
And this is like our ending game, and it is called Guess Who Brand Mascot Edition. So do you remember the game Guess Who?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So our sort of spin is that we're going to describe a famous mascot of a brand. And mascot meaning like spokescreature or spokesperson.
Spokescreature.
and if at any point in our description of it, you're allowed to guess.
Okay.
And then if we get to the end of our it's like a couple sentences explaining who they are, you are allowed 3 yes or no questions. Like if you don't know who it is.
Yeah,
but
so shout it out if you know it.
I'm nervous.
I will be shocked if you don't know at least one of them.
The first one I think is sort of a softball.
I think so too.
But let's just try.
You can't say it's a softball question before, because if I miss it.
That's right. The first one's very hard.
We live to shame our guests.
That's true.
You want me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to read it slow. So at any time, if you know it, shout out the answer. Flip the desk. We are a 6-member group of anthropomorphic snack items.
California raisins?
Let me finish this off then. You got it though. That formed an R&B cover band. We sing and we dance. We became so popular that we were immortalized as figurines and collectibles, some of which I played in the bathtub with as a kid. In our career that we released 4 studio albums.
Studio albums.
Shocking.
That's amazing.
Studio
I
albums.
forgot about the California raisins.
I did too until I was looking up stuff for this, and that the like famous story is that they were like brainstorming. This is 1986. It was for Sun-Maid raisins.
Yeah.
And that one of the writers.
That should have been a thing is can you now guess the brand it was attached to?
Oh, that's true. I wouldn't have. They represented Sun-Maid and another cereal.
A cereal brand. So can you guess the cereal brand that they represented?
Raisin Bran.
Yeah.
Wait, no, but what brand?
Raisin Bran is Post.
Ooh, nice.
There you go.
I wouldn't have known that. I think lots have raisins. Doesn't like
Kellogg has a raisin brand too.
I think a lot of companies incorporate raisins into their cereals, but Raisin Bran is the, Cadillac, if you will. Like it's
The Cadillac of cereal.
no one has ever said that. That was my favorite thing when you're like, I don't think in the history of the world that exact sentence has been said. Raisin Bran is the Cadillac.
That's how post Raisin Bran should now position themselves. The Cadillac of Raisin Bran.
Sorry,
it's not the nicest cereal.
Because we were a Kellogg family. Kellogg Raisin Bran.
Oh, yeah, Battle Creek.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on cereals, but I guess I should stop myself.
All right. Do you want to do the next one?
I'll do the next one. Okay, so we are a pair of deformed, bug-eyed rodents in hats who screech sing about how much we love sandwiches. I don't think I would have gotten this one unless I had.
So?
But you can.
Bug-eyed rodents in hats.
And we screech sing.
How much we love sandwiches. What? We can do impressions if you need us to.
No. I feel like we should actually, the next thing we should do is just play an audio of it.
Do you have it, Linz?
Yeah.
I really am drawing a blank. Because I'm struggling with the rodents to food.
Like they were scary. They gave me nightmares. Well, I guess you can ask your 3
ask your
or no
3 questions.
Are they mascots for an item that goes on a sandwich?
No.
Does it have to do with pest control?
No.
It is a sandwich restaurant.
Oh. 2 bug-eyed rodents wearing hats talking about how much they love sandwiches.
I don't know if rodents is even right. People thought they were rodents.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
We can say
play
what they
it.
are. Okay,
I'll
play
play
the
it. Don't say
commercial.
what they are.
Okay.
Just play it. Don't show her. Don't let her see.
Jingle.
That makes my ears bleed.
Can you look at these guys? Remember?
Do you remember them?
Barely. But that was a
It's
very
2004.
that was a very
It was niche.
yeah, it didn't last that long.
I feel like it was like high school, like late high school.
It's 2004.
Oh, God, college. Okay.
Putting human mouths on inanimate objects or animal was really
Quiznos
popular.
says these are monkeys.
They're spung monkeys.
What? Okay, I would have never.
No.
I have a general Quiznos aversion. It's interesting.
Are they
too,
still around?
If you tune out brands, you are just know you
That's
don't.
right.
They are. They're still around, and what they were infamous for was having toasted subs.
Yeah.
That was their big thing. They hung their rodent hat on.
Talk about an original idea.
Yes.
Toast.
I'm so mad that I didn't stop it before.
I wouldn't have known that they...
I would have literally never
I had no
gotten
idea
that.
what the song was.
But it says that they were in an ad campaign that hit TV screens all around the United States during the 2004 Super Bowl, and that Quiznos wanted a dramatic statement with a small advertising budget. The small budget wanted to make a big statement, and they sure did, because I remember hating that commercial.
Oh, people hated it. They talked about it all the time. People would do like impressions. What do you guys want to eat?
Remember there was a pepper bar? Quiznos was known for a pepper, so they'd be like, we love a pepper bar.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Horrifying.
I think that is Quiznos regional?
I don't know,
God,
actually.
maybe you didn't
I
have
have
these
honestly maybe
commercials.
been to a
They
Quiznos twice in
definitely
my
had
life.
them in Michigan.
But it said Super Bowl.
I mean, I would imagine they had a pretty big reach if
But
they were
that's
Super Bowl.
probably true. I wonder.
I feel much more
Fast food franchise based in Denver, Colorado.
Okay, so out west.
I feel more well versed with Subway. I guess everyone is though, because their brand.
I guess now, if I had to pick between a Quiznos and a Subway, I'd probably pick a Quiznos.
I don't like a hot sandwich.
Not to bash Subway, I just
Oh yeah,
Ellie, you know, if this podcast is about one thing, it's loyalty to Subway. So don't you dare bash Subway on this podcast. Yeah, a guy and his brother wrote that song.
didn't they get drunk and wrote it.
Yeah, they got drunk
drunk?
from the pub and wrote it. And then he said when he listened to it the next morning, he was like, yeah, it's good.
that is
Still
wild.
good. Talk about not editing out I closed the loop. Don't edit out the things you think are going to be weird. It would be a hit Quiznos.
Smash Mouth. Their songs were freestyled. They didn't write Chickadee China, the Chinese chicken. You have a drumstick and your brain stops ticking.
No.
Yeah, it was a total stream of consciousness freestyle.
No.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's why it's so bizarre. Is that All Star?
Did LFO also do that? 'Cause
Walking on the Sun?
I feel like LFO must have also gone freestyle because their lyrics also made no sense.
Summer
No,
Girls.
someone wrote that for them. Those guys.
I don't think they wrote that, but I always wondered if there was like a product placement element of Abercrombie and Fitch, you know?
Felt like
We
it.
wrote that it was about brand partnerships. We
Brand
did a
partnerships, yeah.
one hit wisdom post on Obedient about LFO because it was like cherry Coke, Chinese food.
Yeah. Savage Garden got cherry cola on the map big time.
They did. They didn't get a root beer cream soda or whatever you drink.
Nope. You know, people have trouble with the word cream. They just do. It's just
Like
random
that soda.
I don't feel bad on my entire life.
From someone who said a lot of worse words on Fangasm, she won't take cream.
I was like, ugh, the C word.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
Rebrand them.
Okay. Well, I think just to close out, what do you want people to do to find you? Where do you want to send them?
Yeah, listen to Be There in 5 podcast. It's, largely pop culture related, but you can find that on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and the like. You can find me on Instagram at Be There in 5. These are all FIVE, not the number 5, just to specify. My book is Twinkle Twinkle Social Media Star. And yeah, you can find me chilling with the bitch back, talking about lyrics.
In the backyard.
Backyard, yeah. I live here now.
Stay tuned for our Instagram stories. You'll see a lot more Kate Kennedy.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All
You're the
right,
best.
Kate, coming on, Kate. We love you.
This is Barometric Pressures by Catherine Kennedy, written 2008, maybe 2009, because clearly I was too exasperated by being invited to too many outdoor activities to write the date down. Morning comes. The sun attempts to circumvent my blinds and disrupt my slumber. I am a vampire to the morning's light, appalled by its very arrival, and crippled by its gradual permeation into my bedroom. Another nice day oddly illuminates disappointment. For today, nature promotes productivity, no excuses. All skies clear, all appointments a go, no omnipotent excuse from the skies. To move a little slower, sleep a little longer. I hear voices outside, laughter, frisbee, utter ecstasy, that a warm day has arrived. I hear a tap on my door. It's a beautiful day, let's go to the river, on a walk, a hike, around the world and back. I lock my door. My roommates exclaim, "Who could stay inside on this glorious day? Get up, get out, let's conquer the world," they say. I couldn't care less. I want to sleep in. Why couldn't February give me a cloudy day or a wintry mix to abdicate my tyrannical planner from its throne for one day, when a nice snow could serve as my schedule, canceling all obligations and agendas with its tranquil authority that makes a community sigh with relief. For one morning glance outside can give our weary souls a break. But for today, I must carry on, as the barometric pressure to get things done forces me out of bed, and I embark upon my day until I lay my head down and dream of those rare days when the sky tells me to go back to bed.
To stay up to date with the Bad Girls of Branding, a nickname we gave ourselves, subscribe to the podcast everywhere you listen, and if you like what you're hearing, leave a 5-star review.
And follow us at Brandsplaining on Instagram and Facebook, and at Brandsplain on Twitter, or go to brandsplainingpod.com.
Brandsplaining is brought to you by the Obedient Podcast Network, with production support by Martini Hill, cover art illustration by Halela, and special projects by Orly Spire.
Other podcasts developed by the Obedient Podcast Network include Forward, bringing you the weirdest emails and mass messages from everyone's craziest relatives, and Fangasm, where we read erotic fan fiction about your favorite TV, movie, and book characters. Think Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, The Office, and Star Wars, to name a few.